The Grand Celestial Auction House stood at the center of Vexenine, a massive space station where creatures from every corner of the galaxy were bought and sold like toys in a market. It was a place of wonder and cruelty, where fortunes changed hands in seconds and lives were traded for profit. Ethan Cole pressed his face against the transparent barrier that separated the viewing area from the main auction floor, his breath creating small clouds of fog on the cold surface. He was 12 years old, with messy brown hair and curious eyes that never seemed to stop moving from one strange sight to another. His parents stood nearby, talking to a tall blue-skinned alien about some ancient artifacts they had discovered on their latest expedition. They were xenarchaeologists, which meant they spent their lives digging through the ruins of dead civilizations and trying to understand what had happened to them. Ethan found their work boring most of the time, but he loved the travel. He had seen more planets than most adults would see in their entire lives, and every new world brought new wonders. The auction house was no different. Exotic creatures filled the cages that lined the walls, each one more amazing than the last. A silvery bird with feathers that glowed like captured starlight sang a melody that made everyone who heard it feel a deep sense of peace. A krellhound with 6 legs and telepathic abilities paced back and forth, its golden eyes studying every potential buyer with an intelligence that was almost unsettling. Wealthy aliens from dozens of species walked through the halls, pointing at creatures and making bids through their personal devices. The prices were astronomical, enough to buy entire starships or fund research expeditions for years, but Ethan was not interested in the expensive creatures that everyone wanted. His attention had been captured by something else entirely, something that sat in the farthest corner of the auction house, where the lights were dim and the air smelled of neglect. A dragon. It was small, barely larger than a dog, with scales that should have been magnificent, but instead looked dull and gray like old stone. Its wings were folded against its body, thin and fragile, and its eyes were milky white. Unable to see the world around it, chains wrapped around its neck and legs, far heavier than anything a creature so small should need. It lay on the cold floor of its cage, barely breathing, and no one even glanced in its direction. "What is that?" Ethan asked a nearby attendant, a 4-armed alien with orange skin and an expression of permanent boredom. The attendant looked where Ethan was pointing and made a sound of disgust that needed no translation. "Dracarith," the attendant said, the word coming out like a curse. "Worthless creature, defective symbiote from a dead race. They bond to hosts and drain their life force until nothing remains. Every species in the galaxy knows to stay away from them." Ethan frowned. "Then, why is it here?" "Station regulations," the attendant replied with a shrug of all 4 shoulders. "We found it on a derelict ship and had to process it through the system. No one will buy it, and tomorrow it will be disposed of. Better for everyone." The attendant walked away, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. He could not stop looking at the dragon. There was something about the way it lay there, so still and so sad, that made his chest feel tight. It was not the stillness of an animal waiting to attack, or even an animal that had given up hope. It was the stillness of something that had been alone for so very long, that it had forgotten what hope even felt like. Ethan reached up and touched the pendant that hung around his neck. It was his most treasured possession, a gift from his mother who had found it in the ruins of Thyra Prime during one of her earliest expeditions. The Thyrans had been a great civilization once, powerful and wise, but they had vanished 10,000 years ago without explanation. No one knew what had happened to them, and their language had never been translated despite the best efforts of scholars across the galaxy. The pendant was covered in strange symbols that seemed to shift and change depending on how the light hit them. Every translation matrix in existence had failed to decode their meaning, and even the most advanced artificial intelligences could not make sense of the patterns. but Ethan loved it anyway. It made him feel connected to something ancient and mysterious, something bigger than himself. As he stood there looking at the dragon, the pendant grew warm against his chest. It had never done that before, and Ethan pulled it out from under his shirt to examine it. The symbols were glowing, faintly but definitely glowing, with a soft golden light that pulsed like a heartbeat at that exact moment. The dragon lifted its head, its blind eyes turned toward Ethan, and even though it could not see, he felt absolutely certain that it was looking directly at him. Not at the cage, not at the auction house, but at him specifically. Something passed between them in that instant, something Ethan could not name or explain. It was like a voice without words, a feeling without form, reaching out across the space between them and touching his heart. The dragon made a sound, soft and weak, barely more than a whisper of breath. It was not a roar or a growl, but something closer to a question, as if the creature was asking if what it sensed could possibly be real. Ethan. His mother called from across the hall. "We are leaving now. Come along." He tore his gaze away from the dragon, his heart pounding in his chest. The pendant slowly cooled against his skin, and the glow faded until only the strange symbols remained. But as he walked back to his parents, Ethan could not shake the feeling that something important had just happened, something that would change everything. He looked back one more time and saw the dragon watching him go. Its head still raised, its blind eyes still turned in his direction. Tomorrow it would be disposed of. The attendant had said. Ethan clenched his fists at his sides and made a decision. Tomorrow was not going to happen the way everyone expected. The station was quiet in the deep hours of the night cycle, when the artificial lights dimmed to simulate darkness and most of the inhabitants slept in their quarters. Ethan moved through the corridors like a shadow, his heart beating so loud he was certain someone would hear. I had waited until his parents were asleep, then slipped out of their rented room with nothing but a small bag of food scraps and the determination burning in his chest. What he was doing was dangerous and probably illegal, but he could not make himself care. The dragon's face kept appearing in his mind. Those blind eyes that somehow saw him. That moment of connection that he still could not explain. He had to go back, had to see it again, had to understand what had happened between them. The auction house was closed for the night, but Ethan had noticed something during his visit earlier. A maintenance hatch near the back of the building that the workers used to dispose of waste. He found it easily and squeezed through the narrow opening, dropping down into a dark corridor that smelled of chemicals and decay. This was where they kept the creatures that no one wanted, the ones waiting to be disposed of when morning came. Dragon's cage was exactly where he remembered it. Ethan approached slowly, not wanting to frighten the creature. His pendant grew warm again as he got closer. And this time, he did not try to hide it, but let it hang openly against his chest. The dragon lifted its head at his approach, and even in the dim emergency lighting, Ethan could see that it recognized him. Its dull gray scales seemed to shimmer slightly, and its thin tail gave a weak wag that reminded him of a dog greeting its owner. "Hey there," Ethan whispered, kneeling down beside the cage. "I came back, just like I promised." Well, I did not actually promise out loud, but I promised in my head, and that counts for something, right? The dragon made that soft sound again, the one that was almost like a question, and pressed its snout against the bars of the cage. Ethan reached through and touched it gently. A spark of light flashed between them, bright enough to make him gasp, and suddenly he felt something brush against his mind. It was not words exactly, more like emotions and images flowing directly into his thoughts. Loneliness, vast and deep like an ocean without shores. Time passing in endless, empty cycles. Others of its kind fading away one by one until only it remained. Hope dying slowly like a star running out of fuel. And then, today, a sudden spark of something it had not felt in so long it had almost forgotten the sensation connection. Ethan pulled his hand back, tears streaming down his face without him even realizing it. The dragon had been alone for so long, waiting for something it did not understand, watching its entire species slowly disappear while the galaxy turned its back. "I am going to call you Ash," he said, wiping his eyes with his sleeve, "because your scales look like ashes right now. But I think they used to be beautiful. I think they can be beautiful again." Ash made a sound that might have been agreement or might have been gratitude. Ethan chose to believe it was both. Getting the cage open was easier than he expected. The locks were designed to keep creatures in, not to keep determined 12-year-old humans out. A few minutes of work with a small tool he had borrowed from his father's kit, and the door swung open. Ash did not rush out. Instead, the dragon moved slowly, painfully, its weakened body struggling with even simple movements. Ethan helped as much as he could, supporting the creature's weight as they made their way through the maintenance corridor and out. Into the station proper, they had to hide twice when security patrols passed by. And once Ethan had to carry Ash completely when the dragon's legs gave out. By the time they reached his parents' ship in the docking bay, his arms were aching and his lungs were burning, but they made it. Ethan hid Ash in a storage compartment that was rarely used, making a bed out of old blankets and leaving all the food he had brought. "It was not much, but it was something. I will come back tomorrow with more," he promised, stroking Ash's head gently. "Just hold on, okay? You are not alone anymore." Ash's eyes closed, and for the first time since Ethan had seen the dragon, it seemed to relax. Its breathing deepened, and it curled into a ball on the makeshift bed like a creature that finally felt safe. But safety was not enough over the next few days. As Ethan's parents conducted their research on Vexor 9, he snuck food and water to Ash whenever he could. He spent every spare moment with the dragon, talking to it, keeping it company, trying to understand the strange bond that had formed between them. It was not working. Ash was dying. Every day, the dragon grew weaker. Its scales flaked away like old paint. Its breathing became shallow and labored. And the spark of connection that Ethan had felt was fading like a candle in a storm. Desperate, Ethan searched through every database he could access, looking for information about the Dracarith species. What he found only made his heart sink deeper. The galactic records were clear and unanimous. Dracarith were failed experiments, parasitic creatures that required a resonance bond with a host species to survive. They would attach themselves to another being and slowly drain its life force until both died, but the Dracarith had a fatal flaw. Their unique biology meant that no known species in the galaxy had a compatible biosignature. The bond they needed could never form, which meant they were evolutionary dead ends, doomed to extinction. Every scientist who had studied them agreed. There was no hope for the Dracarith. The kindest thing was to let them fade away quietly. Ethan threw his datapad across the room in frustration. He refused to believe it, refused to accept that Ash had to die just because some aliens 1,000 years ago had decided the species was worthless. There had to be another answer, another explanation, something everyone else had missed. He picked up the datapad again and searched until his eyes burned, until the words on the screen blurred together, until he could barely keep himself awake, and then his pendant began to glow. It was brighter this time, much brighter than before, filling the small storage compartment with golden light. The strange symbols on its surface seemed to move and shift, arranging themselves into patterns that almost made sense. Ash lifted its head weakly, responding to the light, and made a sound that was almost like hope. Ethan held the pendant in his trembling hands and stared at the symbols. For the first time in his life, they did not look like random marks anymore. They looked like words waiting to be read. Ethan stared at the glowing pendant in his hands, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. The symbols were moving, shifting, rearranging themselves into patterns that his mind was somehow starting to understand. It was not like reading a book or hearing someone speak. The meaning came directly into his thoughts, bypassing his eyes and ears entirely and planting itself in his consciousness like a memory he had always had but only just remembered. His mother had told him once that the Thyran language had never been translated because no species in the galaxy could perceive it correctly. Their visual systems were not designed for it. Their cognitive patterns could not process it. And even the most advanced computers failed to find any logic in the seemingly random marks. But humans were different. Ethan did not know why or how, but he was reading the inscription on the pendant as clearly as if it had been written in plain English. The words formed in his mind with perfect clarity, and what they said changed everything he thought he knew. To the worthy who sees, the inscription began, and Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine at the ancient weight of those words. These words are hidden from those who judge by appearance and fear what they do not understand. Only those who see with their hearts will perceive their meaning. Ash made a soft sound beside him, and Ethan continued reading with trembling hands. The Dracarith are not parasites. They are not monsters or failures or evolutionary dead ends. They are guardians created by our civilization to be partners and protectors for those worthy of their bond. Tears began to form in Ethan's eyes as the truth he had somehow always known in his heart was finally confirmed. The galaxy had been wrong about Ash's kind, wrong for 10,000 years. The Dracarith do not drain life force from their bonded partners. The inscription continued. They amplify it. They take what is already within and make it stronger, brighter, more than it ever could have been alone. The bond is not a curse, but a gift, a connection between two souls that makes both greater than the sum of their parts. Ethan looked at Ash, at the weak and dying creature that the entire galaxy had abandoned, and felt his heart break and mend at the same time. We created the Dracarith to be our companions through the ages, but our time has come to an end. We do not know what fate awaits our people, but we know that the Dracarith will survive us. They are too precious to be lost. The symbols pulsed with light as Ethan reached the most important part of the message. But we have learned a terrible truth. The Dracarith can only bond with species that possess certain qualities. It is not about biology or genetics, but about the nature of the soul itself. The partner species must have compassion deep enough to see past fear and prejudice. They must have adaptability strong enough to embrace what is different. And they must have will powerful enough to choose love when hatred would be easier. Ash's blind eyes were fixed on Ethan, and he felt the dragon's consciousness brush against his own like a gentle wave. We have searched the galaxy and found no other species with these qualities. The Dracarith may wait for ages before a worthy partner emerges. They may wait forever. The inscription ended with words that made Ethan's breath catch in his chest. But if you can read this message, then the waiting is over. You are the new chosen. You are the species we hoped would one day exist. Take care of our Dracarith, for they have so much love to give and have been alone for so very long. The glow faded from the pendant, leaving Ethan in the dim light of the storage compartment with tears running down his face and a dying dragon at his feet. He understood now why the Dracarith had been abandoned by the galaxy. Every species that encountered them had seen only what their fear told them to see. They saw a creature that formed bonds with other beings, and they assumed the worst. They never stopped to consider that the bond might be beneficial because their own natures did not allow for such trust. But humans were different. Humans had always been different. They were a species that adopted pets from other continents and called them family. They were a species that risked their lives to save strangers. They were a species that looked at the stars and dreamed of friends they had not yet met. Every other species in the galaxy had rejected the Dracarith because They could not imagine wanting to share themselves so completely with another being humans could not imagine anything more natural. The Sirens made you for themselves, Ethan said softly, reaching out to touch Ash's face. But they are gone now, and you have been waiting all this time for someone new. The galaxy told you that no one would ever want you, that you were broken and worthless and better off dead. Ash made a sound that was halfway between a whimper and a question. They were wrong, Ethan said, and his voice was steady even as his tears continued to fall. I want you. I choose you. And if this bond thing works the way the inscription says it does, then I am ready. He pressed his hand against Ash's chest, right where he imagined the dragon's heart would be, and opened his mind completely. For a moment, nothing happened. Then light exploded between them, golden and brilliant, filling the storage compartment and spilling out into the corridor beyond. Ethan felt Ash's consciousness merge with his own. Not like an invasion, but like two puzzle pieces that had always been meant to fit together. Finally clicking into place, he felt the dragon's memories. 10,000 years of loneliness and rejection, watching its kind fade away one by one while the galaxy treated them like monsters. He felt its pain and its sorrow and its desperate hope that one day someone would understand, and he felt something else too. Something that had been sleeping inside Ash for all those centuries, waiting for the right partner to awaken it, power raw and ancient and magnificent. The power of a guardian who had finally found someone worthy of protection. Ethan gasped as energy surged through his body, changing him in ways he did not yet understand, connecting him to Ash in a bond that could never be broken. The resonance bond had formed, and everything was about to change. The light that poured from the storage compartment was visible across the entire docking bay. Golden and brilliant like a small sun had been born inside the ship. Alarms began to wail as automated systems detected the massive energy surge, and voices shouted in confusion from every direction. But Ethan heard none of it, was lost in the bond, feeling himself and Ash becoming something new, something that had not existed in the galaxy for 10,000 years. Their minds were connected now, not just touching but intertwined, each one completing the other in ways that neither could have achieved alone. Ash's dull gray scales began to change color, spread across them like fire across dry grass, starting from where Ethan's hand pressed against the dragon's chest and flowing outward in waves. Silver and gold replaced the lifeless gray, gleaming with an inner light that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the physical world. The Katamojinadu, dragon's thin and fragile wings stretched and grew, becoming massive and powerful, covered in scales that shimmered with every color of the rainbow when they caught the light. Muscles that had been weak and wasted filled out and strengthened until Ash's body was a picture of perfect health, and the eyes, Ash's milky white eyes, cleared like clouds parting after a storm, revealing irises that swirled with galaxies. Stars and nebulas seemed to spin in those depths, as if the dragon was looking at the entire universe and finding it beautiful. Ash rose to full height, and Ethan stumbled backward in amazement. The dragon was no longer a small, sickly creature that could fit in his arms, but a magnificent beast that barely fit in the storage compartment. Powerful and proud and absolutely breathtaking, but the changes were not limited to Ash. Ethan felt his own body responding to the bond, adapting to its new connection in ways that human biology had never experienced before. His senses expanded beyond anything he had thought possible, allowing him to perceive electromagnetic fields and sense the emotions of every being in the area. Around him, strength flowed through his muscles, not enough to make him superhuman, but enough to make him more than he had been. His mind worked faster and clearer, processing information at speeds that would have been impossible just minutes ago, and underneath it all, he felt Ash's presence like a warm fire in his heart, always there, always watching, always ready to protect him from any threat. We are partners now, Ash's voice said in his mind. And hearing the dragon speak for the first time made Ethan laugh with pure joy. Guardian and bonded, as the Therans intended. I have waited so long for you. I'm sorry you had to wait, Ethan replied through their connection. But I am here now, and I am not going anywhere. The storage compartment door burst open, and Ethan's parents stood there with expressions of absolute shock on their faces. Behind them, station security forces were gathering with weapons drawn, unsure of what they were seeing but certain it could not be good. Ethan. His mother screamed, seeing him standing next to the massive dragon. Get away from that thing. It is okay, Mom, Ethan said, holding up his hands to show he was unharmed. This is Ash. We are bonded now. I can explain everything, but before he could say another word, every screen and speaker on the station flickered to life with an emergency broadcast. A face appeared, humanoid but with dark purple skin and eyes that gleamed with cold intelligence. It was a Vraxian, a member of one of the most powerful military empires in the galaxy. Attention, Vexer 9, the Vraxian said in a voice that expected obedience. I am Commander Zorath of the Vraxian hegemony. Our sensors have detected a resonance surge from your station, indicating that a Dracarys symbiotic bond has been formed. Murmurs of fear spread through the crowd that had gathered. Everyone knew the Vraxians, knew their reputation for ruthlessness and their overwhelming military power. The Vraxian hegemony has maintained peace and order in this sector for 3,000 years. Zorath continued. Part of that responsibility includes preventing the emergence of threats that could destabilize the galactic balance. A fully bonded Dracarys is one such threat. Ethan felt Ash's anger rising through their bond. Memories of Vraxian ships hunting down the remaining Dracarys over centuries, destroying them one by one to eliminate what they saw as dangerous weapons that could not be controlled. We demand that the bonded pair surrender themselves to our custody immediately, Zorath declared. Failure to comply will result in the destruction of the entire station. You have 1 hour. The broadcast ended, and chaos erupted throughout Vexer 9. Ethan's mother grabbed his arm and tried to pull him away from Ash, her eyes wide with terror. His father was shouting at the station security, demanding to know what was happening. Aliens of every species were running in every direction, some trying to reach their ships and escape before the deadline passed. They have been hunting your kind for centuries, Ethan said to Ash through their bond. Why? Because they fear what they cannot control, Ash replied, and there was ancient sorrow in those words. The Vraxians believe that power should belong only to those who can take it by force. A guardian and its bonded represents something different, something that cannot be conquered or dominated. They would rather see us destroyed than allow us to exist. Ethan looked at his terrified parents, at the panicking crowds, at the innocent people who would die if he did not surrender. I will not let them hurt anyone because of me, he said, and I will not let them take you, Ash replied. We are partners now. That means we face our enemies together. Through the viewing ports, the darkness of space began to fill with lights. The Vraxian fleet had arrived, dozens of warships armed with enough firepower to turn the station into dust. Commander Zorath was not bluffing. Ethan took a deep breath and placed his hand on Ash's neck, feeling their bond pulse with shared determination. Then let us show them what a guardian and its bonded can do. The observation deck of Vexer 9 offered a clear view of the approaching doom. Vraxian warships filled the starfield like a swarm of metal insects, their weapons powering up with a glow that promised destruction. Commander Zorath's flagship sat at the center of the formation, massive and terrible. Waiting for the hour to expire, Ethan stood at the viewport with Ash beside him, the dragon's massive form drawing gasps and whispers from the crowd that had gathered. Aliens of every species watched them with a mixture of fear and confusion, unsure whether to see them as the cause of this disaster or their only hope of surviving it. You cannot seriously be thinking of fighting them, Ethan's mother said, her voice shaking. That is an entire battle fleet. You are just a boy and a dragon. This is not one of your adventure stories. I know, Ethan replied, turning to look at her with eyes that seemed older than they had been just hours ago. But if I surrender, they will kill Ash and probably me too. And then what stops them from doing whatever they want to this station anyway? His father stepped forward, struggling to find words. There has to be another way. We could negotiate, offer them something. There is nothing to negotiate, Ash said, and everyone jumped at the sound of the dragon's voice echoing through the deck. The Vraxians do not want peace. They want control. They have been hunting my kind for 3,000 years because they fear what we represent. And what is that? Someone in the crowd called out. It was a Talaxian merchant. His multiple eyes wide with fear, Ash turned to face the crowd, and the galaxy-filled eyes of the dragon seemed to look at each person individually. Partnership, Ash answered. The Dracarith do not conquer or dominate. We bond and protect. We make our partners stronger without taking anything from them. The Vraxians cannot understand a power that does not come from force, so they destroy it instead. Ethan felt the bond between them pulse with shared purpose. Through their connection, he could sense Ash's absolute certainty that this was the moment they had been waiting for. The reason the dragon had survived 10,000 years of loneliness. I am not going to let anyone die today, Ethan announced, his voice carrying across the deck with a confidence that surprised even him. Not the people on this station, and not the Vraxians either. We are going to stop them, but we are going to do it our way. He climbed onto Ash's back, settling between the massive wings like he had done it 1,000 times before. Through their bond, he knew exactly where to sit, exactly how to hold on, exactly how to move with the dragon's body as if they were one being. Open the airlock, Ethan commanded. The station master, an elderly Velaran with silver scales, hesitated for only a moment before nodding to his crew. The massive doors began to separate, revealing the cold emptiness of space, and the enemy fleet beyond Ash's wings spread wide, catching the light and scattering it into 1,000 rainbows. Energy gathered around them both, a shield that would protect them from the vacuum and the weapons that were already being aimed in their direction. Whatever happens, Ethan's mother called out, tears streaming down her face. I love you. I love you too, Ethan replied. And I will be back. I promise. Then Ash launched from the deck, and they were flying through space itself. The sensation was unlike anything Ethan had ever experienced. Ash's wings did not need air to function, instead manipulating fields of energy that pushed against the fabric of space itself. They moved faster than any ship could match, weaving between the Vraxian vessels as plasma fire erupted all around them. Through their bond, Ethan could see what Ash saw, feel what Ash felt. His amplified mind calculated trajectories and weak points in microseconds, feeding the information to his partner, who adjusted their course with perfect precision. The ships have shield generators on their upper hulls, Ethan noted. If we disable those, they cannot fire without risking damage to themselves. Then that is what we shall do, Ash replied. And the dragon's jaws opened to release a beam of pure golden light. The first warship shuddered as its shields collapsed, leaving it helpless but unharmed. Ash did not destroy it, did not kill the crew inside, simply moved on to the next target. Ship after ship fell before them, not in flames and death, but in careful surgical strikes that left the vessels disabled but intact. Ethan refused to let their victory come at the cost of lives, even the lives of enemies who would have killed them without hesitation. Commander Zorath's voice crackled over every frequency. All ships, concentrate fire on the dragon. I want it destroyed. But the Vraxian gunners could not hit what they could not predict. Ethan and Ash moved as one, their combined reflexes and intelligence making them impossible to target. Every shot missed, every missile was dodged. Every trap was avoided. Finally, only the flagship remained ash-hovered before the massive vessel. Wings spread wide, scales gleaming with the light of distant stars. Inside, Commander Zoreth stood at his viewport, staring at the boy and dragon who had dismantled his entire fleet. Without killing a single soldier, Ethan met the commander's eyes through the glass. "You could have destroyed them all," Zoreth said. His voice transmitted through a speaker in Ash's hearing range. "Why did you hold back?" "Because that is not who we are," Ethan replied. "The Dracarith are guardians, not weapons. They protect and strengthen. They do not destroy. Your people spent 3,000 years hunting them because you could not understand that simple truth. And what about you?" Zoreth demanded. "What are humans that they could bond with these creatures when no other species could?" Ethan smiled, a 12-year-old boy sitting on the back of an ancient dragon, having just defeated an entire battle fleet without shedding a single drop of blood. Humans are the species that sees a monster and wonders if it might be a friend. We are the species that chooses compassion, even when hatred would be easier. And we are the species that was waiting for the Dracarith just as much as they were waiting for us. He guided Ash down to the flagship's hull and placed his hand against the metal. "Go home. Commander, tell your people what you saw here today. The Dracarith are not your enemies, and neither are humans. But if you ever threaten innocent lives again, we will stop you. Not with death, but with something your empire has never understood." "And what is that?" "Mercy," Ethan said. "The strength to win without becoming the thing you are fighting against." Then he and Ash flew back to Vexor 9, where a crowd of amazed aliens watched them land with expressions of pure wonder. In the weeks that followed, word spread across the galaxy. Other humans began to arrive, curious about the bond between their species and the Dracarith. Orphan dragons emerged from hiding, sensing that the long wait was finally over. One by one, bonds were formed, partnerships were created, and the guardians that had been forgotten for 10,000 years began to fly again. When asked how humanity had unlocked the ancient secret, Ethan always gave the same answer: "We just saw something that needed a friend and decided to be one." That is all it ever takes. And across the stars, for the first time in 10 millennia, dragons and their human partners soared through the darkness together, bringing light wherever they went.